first document is Article 6, Clause 2, which is going to tie into some other things that we're going to be talking about later on. If you could give us a quick read of Clause 2, the Supremacy Clause.
This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in each state shall be bound thereby, and anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary, notwithstanding.
Okay. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof. So, following behind.
Okay.
And all treaties made, or which shall be made. So we're talking about 1787, 1836. That those are the treaties that had already been made, and the ones to follow, which shall be made, which are the treaties, declarations, and conventions that we recognize in modern day, right?
Right.
So 1880, 1906 Treaty of Algeciras, the rights of indigenous people, all these other international documents which shall be made under the authority of the United States, so with their signature, giving their consent, shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. So they don't even have the option to not observe this, right? Because in their own constitution, they're stating all the treaties that are inactive right now, which, this is the late 1700s, treaties, declarations, and conventions which are in effect or which shall come into effect, shall supersede the Constitution is basically what they're saying.
Okay.
Right? And the judges in every state shall be bound to observe. So they don't even have any latitude. I want to find for a judgment on the side of somebody else. They can't. Because it states right here in their own Constitution, the judges in every state shall be bound.
Yes.
Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So any charter colony, because we do understand that the U.S. corporation got their charter from the Sultan of Morocco. So that charter was then recognized by the Sultan of Morocco. The state charters, which came after, when we happen to be in this corporate jurisdiction of the charter colony of Colorado, right? But they got their charter from the corporate charter. And then the municipal charters, right?
Yeah.
So we're 3 levels down now. So we're in the city and county of Denver, right?
Yes.
Which is a charter that came under the Colorado charter, which came under the charter of the United States, which was allowed to exist by the Sultan of Morocco, right? So I'm just trying to illustrate that to you to kind of give you a full understanding of what they signed on to.
Okay.
And how we can hold their feet to the fire by, again, putting it in their own constitution, and then secondly, signing these treaties, declarations, and conventions, which are international law. So what we're going to introduce right now is the United Nations Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We're going to start out with a resolution adopted by the General Assembly. Now, what I've done is adapted it because some of the indigenous, autochthonous Moors aren't making the connection that this is a document that kind of reflects some of their concerns, or all of their concerns. So what I've done is take this document and prepared my own document, but I've just replaced a couple of key words to help you really make the connection. If you want to start reading at the top, the resolution adopted by the General Assembly.
Okay. A resolution adopted by the General Assembly without reference to a main committee A611.67 and add.161/295. United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Moorish Nationals. The General Assembly, taking note of the recommendation of the Human Rights Council contained in its Resolution 1-2 of 29 June 2006, one by which the Council adopted the text of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, recalling its Resolution 61/178 of 20 December 2006, by which is decided to defer consideration of an action on the declaration to allow time for further consultation thereon, and also decide to conclude its consideration before the end of the 61st session of the General Assembly. Assembly adopts the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Moorish National as contained in the annex to the present solution. 107th plenary meeting, 13 September 2007. Annex United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Moorish Nationals. The General Assembly, guided by the purpose and principles of the Charter of the United Nations and good faith in the fulfillment of the obligations assumed by state in accordance with the Charter, affirming the Moorish nationals are equal to all other peoples, while recognizing the right of all people to be different, to consider themselves different, and to be respected as such. Affirming also that all people contribute to the diversity and richness of civilization and cultures, which constitutes the common heritage of humankind. Affirming further that all doctrines, policies, and practices based on or advocated superiority of people or individuals on the basis of national origin or racial or religion, ethics, or cultural differences are racist, scientifically false, legally invalid, morally condemnable, and socially unjust. Reaffirming that Moorish nationals in the exercises of their rights should be free from discrimination of any kind. Concerned that Moorish nationals have suffered from historic injustice as a result of inter alia, their colonization and dispositions of their lands, terrorizes and resources, thus preventing them from exercising, in particular, their right to development in accordance with their own needs and interests. Recognizing the urgent need to respect and promote the inherent right of Moorish nationals, which derive from their political, economic, and social structures, and from their cultures, spiritual traditions, histories, and philosophies, especially their rights to their lands, territories, and resources. Recognizing also the urgent need to respect and promote the rights of Moorish nationals affirmed in treaties, agreements, and other constructive agreements, which states welcoming the fact that Moorish nationals are organizing themselves for political, economic, social, and cultural enhancement, and in order to bring to an end all forms of discrimination and oppression wherever they occur. Convinced that control by Moorish nationals over developments affecting them and their lands, territories, and resources will enable them to maintain and strengthen their institutions, cultures, and traditions, and to promote their development in accordance with their aspirations and needs. Recognizing that respect for indigenous knowledge, cultures, and traditional practices contributes to sustainable and equitable development and proper management of the environment. Emphasizing the contribution of the demilitarization of the lands and territories of Moorish nationals to peace, and economic and social progress and development, understanding and friendly relations among nations and peoples of the world, recognizing in particular the right of indigenous families and communities to retain shared responsibility for their upbringing, training, education, and well-being of their children, consistent with the rights of the child. Considering that the rights affirmed in treaties, agreements, and other constructive agreements between state and Moorish nationals are in some situations matters of international concern, interest, responsibility, and character, considering also that treaties, agreements, and other constructive agreements and the relationship they represent are the basis for a strengthened partnership between Moorish nationals and state. Acknowledging that the Charter of the United Nations, the international covenants on economic, social, and cultural rights, and the international covenant on civil and political rights, as well as the U.N.D.R.I.P Declaration and Program of Action, affirm the fundamental importance of the right to self-determination of all peoples, by virtue of which they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development, bearing in mind that nothing in the Declaration may be used to deny any people's their right to self-determination exercised in conformity with international law. Convinced that the recognition of the rights of Moorish nationals in this declaration will enhance harmonious and cooperative relations between the state and indigenous people based on principles of justice, democracy, respect for human rights, non-discrimination, and good faith, encouraging states to comply with and effectively implement all their obligations as they apply to Moorish nationals under international instruments, in particular those related to human rights, in consultation and cooperation with the people concerned. Emphasizing that the United Nations has an important and continuing role to play in promoting and protecting the rights of indigenous people, believing that the Declaration is a further important step forward for the recognition, promotion, and protection of the rights and freedoms of Moorish nationals, and in the development of relevant activities of the United Nations system in this field. Recognizing and affirming that indigenous individuals are entitled without discrimination to all human rights recognized in international law, and the Moorish nationals possesses collective rights which are indispensable for their existence, well-being, and integral development as peoples, recognizing that the situation of Moorish nationals varies from region to region and from country to country, and that the significance of national and regional particularities and various historical and cultural background should be taken into consideration. Solemnly proclaims for following United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Moorish Nationals as a standard of achievement to be pursued in a spirit of partnership and mutual respect.
From the original text, what I did was substitute Moorish nationals for the term indigenous peoples. And when you were reading that, did it have more significance? Did it resonate better with you when you read it as Moorish national as opposed to indigenous people?
It sure did.
Because it seemed like a more, a term that was just general, right?
Right.
But in that generality, we're included. But I wanted to switch those words to kind of get you to understand that this document is about us as well. Not to say that we're the only indigenous peoples, because this is talking about indigenous peoples around the world.
Yes.
Which is why they had to use such a general term. But what I've done is brought it back home to have you understand that this document is also about you. Your indigenous identity, your indigenous culture, your indigenous right to govern yourself. I read the first 5 articles of the modified United Nations Rights on the Declarations of Indigenous People,
Okay.
which we've entitled Moorish Nationals.
Okay.
Go ahead, Article 1.
Moorish nationals have the right to the full enjoyment as a collective or as individuals of all human rights and fundamental freedoms as recognized in the Charter of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and international human rights law. 2. Moorish nationals and individuals are free and equal to all other people and individuals and have the right to be free from any kind of discrimination in the exercise of their rights, in particular that based on their indigenous origin or identity. 3. Moorish nationals have the right to self-determination by virtue of the right they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. 4. Indigenous people, in exercising their right of self-determination, have the right to autonomy of self-government in matters relating to Resolution 217A3.5, their internal and local affairs, as well as ways and means for financing their autonomous functions. And 5, Moorish nationals have the right to maintain and strengthen their distinct political, legal, economic, social, and cultural institutions while retaining their right to participate fully, if they so choose, in the political, economic, social, and cultural life of the state.
Okay, we're gonna pause there.
Okay.
Well, what you just read is them trying to intermingle international law,
Mm-hmm.
state law,
Mm-hmm.
and your rights as a Moor. So again, they're intermingling international law, state law, and your rights of self-determination as a Moor, right? So they're addressing these 3 issues, and they're commingling them and allowing you to understand that you do have the ability to organize in a political manner. And there can be no interference from charter colony policy enforcers, from municipalities, from U.N.D.R.I.P corporations, because there's an effort to decolonize the world. And this is kind of a document that's putting all that into framework for you so that you can understand that This again is for indigenous people around the world. But more specifically, I wanted to bring it home and let Moors know that this document is talking specifically to them as well. Let's continue with Article 6.
Every indigenous individual has the right to a nationality. 7. Indigenous individuals have the right to life, physical and mental integrity, liberty, and security of person. Moorish nationals have the collective right to live in freedom, peace, and security as distinct people, and shall not be subject to any act of genocide or any other act of violence, including forcible removing children of the group to another group. And then 8, Moorish nationals and individuals have the right not to be subject to forced assimilation or destruction of their culture. States shall provide effective mechanisms for prevention of and redress for any action which has the aim of or effect of depriving them of their integrity as distinct people or of their culture, cultural values or ethnic identities by action which has the aim or effect of dispossessing them of their land, territories, or resources. Any form of forced population transfer which has the aim or effect of violating or undermining any of their rights. D. Any form of forced assimilation or integration. E. Any forms of propaganda designed to promote or incite racial or ethnic discrimination directed against them.
Pause there. I want to go back over Article 8. Okay, Article 8. Moorish nationals and individuals have the right not to be subjected to forced assimilation or destruction of their culture. Give me an example of forced assimilation.
Being ordered or taken or stripped away from what they're already been organized under to now conform to do something else.
True.
Okay.
But I'm going to give you like a basic example.
Okay.
Your hair. Corporate society is trying to dictate that you have to have a bald fade, or for women, they want them to have permed hair or something of that nature, right?
Right.
That's forced assimilation. And by this document, it's against international law, right?
Right.
But as a Negro, Black, or colored, you're subject protege status, which means you don't have the right to invoke this international declaration as your defense. That's the importance. When you have a government to intercede on your behalf and let them know, hey, you're violating the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, Article 8, where it says you can't force me to assimilate by changing my hair. That's the importance of these documents, right?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna move on to Article 9.
Okay, number 9. Moorish nationals and individuals have the right to belong to an indigenous community or nation in accordance with the traditions and custom of the community or nation concerned. No discrimination of any kind may arise from the exercise of such a right. Number 10. Moorish nationals shall not be forcibly removed from their land or territories. No relocation shall take place without the free, prior, and informed consent of the Moorish nationals concerned and after agreement on just and fair compensation and, where possibly, with the option of return. 11. Moorish nationals have the right to practice and revitalize their cultural traditions and custom. This includes the right to maintain, protect, and develop the past, present, and future manifestations of their cultures, such as archaeological and historical sites, artifacts, designs, ceremonies, technologies, and visual and performing arts and literature. 2. State shall provide redress through effective mechanisms which may include restitution developed in conjunction with indigenous people with respect to their cultural, intellectual, religious, and spiritual property taken without their free, prior, and informed consent, or in violation of their laws, traditions, and customs. 12. Number 1. Moorish nationals have the right to manifest, practice, develop, and teach their spiritual and religious traditions, customs, and ceremonies, the right to maintain, protect, and have access in privacy to their religious and cultural sites, the right to the use and control of their ceremonial objects, and the right to their reparations of repatriations of their human remains. 2. State shall seek to enable the access and or repatriations of ceremonial objects and human remains in their possession through fair, transparent, and effective mechanisms developed in conjunction with Moorish nationals concerned. That's 7. And then Article 13, number 1. Moorish nationals have the right to revitalize, use, develop, and transmit to future generations their histories, languages, oral traditions, philosophies, writing systems, and literatures, and to designate and retain their own names for communities, places, and persons. 2. State shall take effective measures to ensure that this right is protected, and also ensure that Moorish nationals can understand and be understood in political, legal, and administrative proceedings where necessary through the provision of interpretation or by other appropriate means. 14. Number 1. Moorish nationals have the right to establish and control their educational system and institutions providing education in their own languages in a manner appropriate to their cultural methods or teaching and learning. 2. Indigenous individuals, particularly children, have the right to all levels and forms of education of the state without discrimination. 3. States shall, in conjunction with indigenous people, take effective measures in order for indigenous individuals, particularly children, including those living outside their communities, to have access, when possible, to an education in their own culture and provided in their own language. Article 15. Number 1. Moorish nationals have the right to dignity and diversity of their cultures, traditions, histories, and aspirations, which shall be appropriately reflected in education and public information. 2. States shall take effective measures in consultation and cooperation with the Moorish nationals concerned to combat prejudice and eliminate discrimination, and to promote tolerance, understanding, and good relations among Moorish nationals and all other segments of society.
Pause there. Article 14. Moorish nationals have the right to establish, and control their educational systems and institutions, providing education in their own languages in a manner appropriate to their cultural methods of teaching and learning. 2, indigenous individuals, particularly children, have the right to all levels and forms of education of the state without discrimination. 3, states shall, in conjunction with indigenous peoples, take effective measures in order for indigenous individuals, particularly children, including those living outside their communities, to have access, when possible, to an education in their own culture and provided in their own language. So this is stating that the states shall, in conjunction with Moorish government, establish schools where indigenous people, particularly children, including those living outside their communities, have access to an education in their own culture and provided in their own language. Now I want you to gloss over the legalese there. Shall is one of the strongest forms of enforcement in a contract because there's no wiggle room.
Yes.
Shall. And this document is providing us with all the ammunition that we need as a government to go after the states and hold them accountable for, again, the treaties, declarations, and convention that they've signed on to. Right?
Right.
Because that's all we're doing is holding them accountable for what they signed. If you go sign a lease to an apartment, if you move out, they're gonna hold you accountable for that deposit. They're gonna want the 2 or 3 months that you have due. Any contract is the same.
Yes.
What we're doing as a government is holding them accountable. No more, no less. And it's not in an aggressive, belligerent manner, but as a matter of fact manner.
Yes.
Because you don't have to be overly aggressive because the contract already outlines what's supposed to happen. It shall. Article 15, Moorish nationals have the right to the dignity and diversity of their cultures, traditions, histories, and aspirations, which shall be appropriately reflected in education and public information. States shall take effective measures in consultation, cooperation with Moorish nationals concerned to combat prejudice and eliminate discrimination and promote tolerance, understanding, and good relation among Moorish nationals and other segments of society. So we're saying that the municipalities have a duty to Moorish nationals to educate them about who we are and to combat prejudice and eliminate discrimination against Moorish nationals.
Yes.
That's their duty, and they shall, by this contract, make it happen. Article 16.
Okay. Moorish nationals have the right to establish their own media in their own languages and to have access to all forms of non-indigenous media without discrimination. States shall take effective measures to ensure that state-owned media do reflect indigenous cultural diversity states without prejudice to ensuring full freedom of expression, should encourage privilege-owned media to adequately reflect indigenous cultural diversity. 17, indigenous individuals and people have the right to enjoy fully all rights established under applicable international and domestic labor law. States shall, in consultation and cooperation with Moorish nationals, take specific measures to protect indigenous children from economic exploitation and from performing any work that is likely to be hazardous or to interfere with the child's education or to be harmful to the child's health, or physical, mental, spiritual, moral, or social development, taking into account their special vulnerability and the importance of education for their empowerment. 3, indigenous individuals have the right not to be subjected to any discriminatory conditions of labor and inter alia employment or salary. 18, Moorish nationals have the right to participate in decision making in matters which should affect their rights through representatives chosen by themselves in accordance with their own procedures, as well as to maintain and develop their own indigenous decisions making institutions. 19, states shall consult and cooperate in good faith with the Moorish nationals concerned through their own representative institutions in order to obtain their free, prior, and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislatives or administrative measures that may affect them. 20, Moorish nationals have the right to maintain and develop their political, economic, and social system or institutions to be secure in the enjoyment of their own means of subsistence and development, and to engage freely in all their traditional and other economic activities. 9.9. 2, Moorish nationals deprived of their means of subsistence and development are entitled to a just and fair redress.
Pause there. Article 18. Moorish nationals have the right to participate in decision-making in matters which would affect their rights through representatives chosen by themselves in accordance with their own procedures, as well as to maintain and develop their own indigenous decision-making institutions. What does that mean?
Well, it just means that we have the right, the ability to make our own decision. Period.
Okay. They're basically outlining that you have the right to establish a government.
Okay.
Because again, participate in decision making in matters that would affect their rights through representatives being a representative government.
Okay.
So let's say in their construct, it would be senator, congressman, legislature, 3 branches of government, the representative chosen by the Moors in accordance with their own procedures.
Okay.
So we've got to choose our own governments in accordance with our own elections, as well as to maintain and develop our own indigenous decision-making institutions. So it's up to us to maintain our own governments.
Okay.
19, states shall consult and cooperate in good faith with Moorish nationals concerned through their own representative institutions in order to obtain their free, prior, and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislative or administrative measures that may affect them. So what does that mean to you?
Well, from what I'm understanding or what I've heard, so I guess the states, would that be the United States?
What could be this particular
Or
municipality?
Okay.
So let's just say chartered colony, state of Colorado.
Okay.
So state of Colorado shall consult and cooperate in good faith with Moorish nationals concerned through their own representative institutions. So they shall cooperate with Moorish government,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Melodia Moorish Brede Monte, Colorado. They shall consult and cooperate in good faith with AMPAC in order to obtain their our free, prior, and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislative or administrative measures that may affect us. because it's our indigenous land,
Yes.
right? So our indigenous land, our indigenous government, and because they're a charter colony, they have to consult and cooperate in good faith with us. And again, going back to the beginning, supremacy clause ties into this, and the judges already know that they have to side on the side of the Constitution, which states that treaties, those made or which shall be made, are the supreme law of the land, right?
Yes.
So we've already got the 1787-1836 treaty made. This is an international document that shall be made and agreed to by the international community, right? They have to hold them accountable to this. We get to hold their feet to the fire. That's the whole purpose of having representative government. Because the rest of the world knows, okay, well, these international documents, treaties, and declarations, if we all sign them, we have recourse.
Yes.
We can take, whatever government, whatever, in our case, the Charter Colony Corporation, U.N.D.R.I.P Corporation, to international court. And we can sue them based on their breach of international treaties, declarations, and conventions. But you can't do that as an individual. You don't have that power. You can't hold them to the fire. You can't hold their feet to the fire, is what I mean. Article 21.
Moorish nationals have the right, without discrimination, to the improvement of their economic and social conditions, including inter alia in the areas of education, employment, vocational training, and retraining, housing, sanitation, health, and social security. States shall take effective measures and, where appropriate, special measure to ensure continuing improvement of their economic and social conditions. Particular attention shall be paid to the rights and special needs of indigenous elders, women, youth, children, and persons with disabilities. 22. 1. Particular attention shall be paid to the rights and special needs of indigenous elders, women, youth, children, and persons with disabilities in the implementation of this declaration. 2. States shall take measures in conjunction with indigenous people to ensure that indigenous women and children enjoy the full protection and guarantees against all forms of violence and discrimination. 23. Moorish nationals have the right to determine and develop priorities and strategies for exercising their right to development. In particular, Moorish nationals have the right to be actively involved in developing and determining health, housing, and other economic and social programs affecting them, and as far as possible to administer such programs through their own institution. 24. Moorish nationals have the right to their traditional medicine and to maintain their health practices, including the conservation of their vital medical plants, animals, and minerals. Indigenous individuals also have the right to access without any discrimination to all social and health services. 2. Indigenous individuals have an equal right to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. States shall take the necessary steps with a view of achieving progressively the full realization of this right. 25. Moorish nationals have the right to maintain and strengthen their distinctive spiritual relationship with their traditional owned or otherwise occupied and used lands, territories, waters, and coastals, seas, and other resources, and to uphold their responsibilities to further generations in this regard. 26. Moorish nationals have the right to the land, territories, and resources which they have traditional owned, occupied, or otherwise used or acquired. Moorish nationals have the right to own, use, develop, and control the lands, territories, and resources that they possess by reasons of traditional ownership or other traditional occupation or use, as well as those which they have otherwise acquired. 3. States shall give legal recognition and protection of these lands, territories, and resources. Such recognition shall be conducted with due respect to the custom, traditions, and land tenure system of the Moorish national concerned. 27. The state shall establish and implement in conjunction with Moorish nationals concerned a fair, independent, impartial, open, and transparent process, giving due recognition to indigenous peoples' laws, traditions, customs, and land tenure system, to recognize and adjudicate the right of Moorish nationals pertaining to their lands, territories, and resources, including those which were traditionally owned or otherwise occupied or used. Moorish nationals shall have the right to participate in this process. 28. Moorish nationals have the right to redress by means that can include restitution, or when this is not possible, just fair and equitable compensation for the lands, territories, and resources which they have traditionally owned or otherwise occupied or used, and which have been confiscated, taken, occupied, used, or damaged without their free, prior, and informed consent. Unless otherwise freely agreed upon by the people concerned, compensation shall take the form of lands, territories, and resources. 11. Equal in quality, size, and legal stature of monetary compensation or other appropriate redress. Thank you. 29. Moorish nationals have the right to the conservation and protection of the environment and the productive capacity of their lands or territories and resources. States shall establish and implement assistance programs for Moorish nationals for such conservation and protection without discrimination. 2. States shall take effective measures to ensure no storage or disposal of hazardous materials shall take place in the lands or territories of Moorish nationals without their free, prior, and informed consent. 3. States shall also take effective measures to ensure, as needed, that programs for monitoring, maintaining, and restoring the health of indigenous people as developed and implemented by the people affected by such materials are duly implemented. 30. Military activities shall not take place in the lands or territories of indigenous people unless justified by a relevant public interest or otherwise freely agreed with or requested by the Moorish nationals concerned. States shall undertake effective consultation with the Moorish nationals concerned through appropriate procedures, and in particular through their representative institutions prior to using their land or territories for military activities. 31. Moorish nationals have the right to maintain, control, protect, and develop their cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and traditional cultural expressions, as well as the manifestation of their science, technologies, and cultures, including human and genetic resources, seeds, medicines, knowledge of the properties of fauna and flora, oral traditions, literatures, designs, sports, and traditional games and visual and performing arts. They also have the right to maintain, control, protect, and develop their intellectual property of such cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and traditional cultural expressions. In conjunction with indigenous people, states shall take effective measures to recognize and protect the exercises of these rights. 32. Moorish nationals have the right to determine and develop properties and strategies for the development or use of their lands or territories and other resources. States shall consult and cooperate in a good faith with the Moorish nationals concerned through their own representative institutions in order to obtain their free and informed consent prior to the approval of any project affecting their lands or their territories and other resources, particularly in connection with the development, utilization, or exploitation of minerals, water, or other resources. States shall provide effective mechanism for just any fair redress for any such activities and appropriate measures shall be taken to mitigate adverse environmental, economic, social, cultural, or spiritual impact. 33. Moorish nationals have the right to determine their own identity or membership in accordance with their custom and traditions. This does not impair the right of indigenous individuals to obtain citizenship or the states in which they live. Moorish nationals have the right to determine the structures and to select the membership of their institutions in accordance with their own procedures. 34. Moorish nationals have the right to promote, develop, and maintain their institutional structures and their distinctive customs, spirituality, traditions, procedures, practices, and in the case where they exist, the judicial system or customs in accordance with international human rights standards. 35. Moorish nationals have the right to determine the responsibility of individuals to their communities. 36. Indigenous people, in particular those divided by international borders, have the right to maintain and develop contracts, relations, and corporations, including activities for spiritual, cultural, political, economic, and social purposes with their own members as well as other peoples across borders. States, in consultation and cooperation with indigenous people, shall take effective measures to facilitate the exercises and ensure the implementation of this right.
Pause. Okay, Article 36. Indigenous people, in particular those divided by international borders, have the right to maintain and develop contracts, relations, and cooperation. Treaty. That's what that's saying. Indigenous people have the right to maintain and develop treaties, relations, and cooperations, including activities for spiritual, cultural, political, economic, and social purposes with their own members, as well as other Moors across borders.
Okay.
So we can enter into treaty with state of Moorish, which is a corporate jurisdiction of Indiana. We can enter into treaty with the state of anti-Georgia. We can enter into treaty with Lodium Moorish Palladium, New Mecca, which is the former corporate jurisdiction of Oregon. By this international document, we have the right to maintain and develop those treaties and cooperations, including activities for spiritual, cultural, political, economic, and social purposes with our own members, as well as Moors across borders. States, in consultation and cooperation with indigenous peoples, shall take effective measures to facilitate the exercise and ensure the implementation of this right. 37. Moorish nationals have the right to the recognition, observance, and enforcement of treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements concluded with states or their successors, and to have states honor and respect such treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements. So this is also saying that our government has a right to enter into a contract or agreement with a corporate jurisdiction or their successor, which would be Moorish government moving into place and establishing itself. So we have the latitude to establish an arrangement with the state or their Moorish successor and respect such treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements. Nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as diminishing or eliminating the rights of Moorish nationals contained in treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements. I think we'll have to pick up on 38.
Okay.
Pause. Okay, Article 38.
States in consultation and cooperation with indigenous people shall take their appropriate measures, including legislative measures, to achieve the end of this declaration. 39. Moorish nationals have the right to have access to financial and technical assistance from states and through international corporations for the enjoyment of the rights contained in this declaration. 40. Moorish nationals have the right to access to and prompt decision through just and fair procedures for the resolution of conflicts and disputes with states or other parties, as well as to effective remedies for all infringements of their individual and collective rights. Such as decisions shall give due consideration to the customs, traditions, rules, and legal systems of the Moorish national concern and international human rights. 41. The organs and specialized agencies of the United Nations system and other intergovernmental organizations shall contribute to the full realization of the provision of the declaration through the mobilization inter alia of financial cooperation and technical assistance, ways and means of ensuring participation of Moorish nationals on issues affecting them shall be established. 42. The United Nations, its bodies, including the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and special agencies, including at the country level and state, shall promote respect for and full application of the provisions of the declaration and follow up in the effectiveness of this declaration. 43. The rights recognized herein constitute the minimum standards for the survival, dignity, and well-being of the Moorish nationals of the world. 44. All the rights and freedom recognized herein are equally guaranteed to to male and female indigenous individuals. 45. Nothing in the Declaration may be construed as diminishing or extinguishing the rights Moorish nationals have now or may acquire in the future. 46. 1. Nothing in the Declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, people, group, or person any rights to engage in any activity or to perform any act contrary to the Charter of the United Nations or construed as authorizing or encouraging any action which would dismember or impair totally or in part the territorial integrity of political unity of sovereign and independent states. 2. In the exercise of the rights and enunciated in the present Declaration, human rights and fundamental freedoms of all shall be respected. The exercise of the rights set forth in this declaration shall be subject only to such limitation as are determined by law. 15. And in accordance with international human rights obligations, any such implementation shall be non-discriminatory and strictly necessary solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others and for meeting the necessary solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedom of others and for meeting the just and most compelling requirements of a democratic society. 3. The provision set forth in this declaration shall be interpreted in accordance with the principles of justice, democracy, respect for human rights, equality, non-discrimination, good governance, and good faith.
Okay, good read.
Thank you.
But what did you get out of it? What did you take away from that?
We have the right to be ourselves, that without discrimination, without interference. We have the full authority, protection, provision for us to use our language, our abilities, our wisdom, or whatever it is, to grow, develop our children, women, ourselves, those that want to partake in all of this, that we are protected to govern ourselves.
Exactly. And to establish a government to represent us in these international matters as a representative democracy. So I was hoping that just that slight change of verbiage could really draw people into understanding that this is not only just a general document that's meant to provide protection for indigenous people, but more so, it's a document that speaks to us as well. That we have some buy-in, we have some skin in the game, and we can use this to represent ourselves and also to defend ourselves in international court when it comes to, filing a suit against a corporation and holding them accountable for, rights of indigenous people, asking them to hold themselves accountable for all treaties, declarations, and conventions that they've signed. And it's not just us asking that, it's the international community, because you can't just arbitrarily break one treaty and think it's not going to have a ripple effect around the world.
Yes.
So, again, these are the receipts that we have, and the paper trail is necessary, but definitely worth, it's definitely worth keeping. because these are the things that we're going to have to take to represent us, need be, in International Criminal Court when we take our cause to that level. But again, I appreciate you reading. I appreciate the fact that everyone tuned in for the lesson. And until next time, Islam.